Okay, evening. Hope all of you are doing well. I want to start with reviewing the first four psukim of Sefer Ezra, because we're probably tonight going to only concentrate on the first four psukim. I'm going to re-ask some questions from last week, and we're going to look at a number of Mefarshim, the Dad Sofrim, Rashi, Ralbag, and maybe some others. So this way we'll be a little bit more focused on what we're going to do. I doubt we're going to get past Perek, Pasuk Daled, so I'm going to just reread the first four psukim again in Perek Aleph. Ubishnat achat leKoresh, Melech Paras is in the first year of the rule of the king of Persia, whose name was Koresh.
Again, Rabbi, excuse me.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? I just want to dedicate tonight's learning.
Please.
Sorry. I would like to dedicate this to the memory of Ezra and Nehemiah, whose yortzeit is tonight, the 9th of Tevet.
Awesome.
Look it up. I did already. Don't worry. My wife pointed that. My dear wife pointed that out to me. That is Ezra and Nehemiah. Their yortzeit is tonight. So.
Wow.
Anyway, I'm going back on mute. So
thank you very much. So that's a pretty good dedication. Excellent. Thank you so much. Hopefully I will not embarrass neither Ezra nor Nehemiah this evening. Okay. So again, Ushnat achad leKoresh melech Paras, it was in the first year of the rule or the reign of Koresh, king of Persia, Lichlot dvar Hashem mipir Yirmiyah, when the word of Hashem that had been spoken to Yirmiyahu had been fulfilled. And we're just going to, in a very surface way, say that means it's come to the end of the 70 years, whatever that 70 years is. We're not going to get into it right now. Vayaver kol v'chol malchuto, and the proclamation went out through all of the land. V'gama b'michtav, and also a written proclamation. In other words, there was a verbal discussion, that a word that went around the country, and also beyond word of mouth, it also went out with an actual edict or writing, which became known as Hatzarat Koresh, or the declaration of Koresh. And it says as follows: Pasuk Bet, Gimel, and Daled is what we're going to read. Koresh Melech Paras.
I'm sorry, did you skip the Ha'ira Hashem et Yerucho Koresh?
Oh, it's right. I skipped a few words. Thank you. I was going to say I'm very tired. I think that's approved it. Let's try that again. He'ir Hashem et Ruach Koresh Melech Paras. Hashem, let's just say, arouse the spirit in the king of Persia. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're going to come back to those words, obviously. And then he does this proclamation. Thank you, Harry. Ko amar Koresh melech Paras, so has the king of Persia named Koresh said, Kol mamlechot haaretz natan li Hashem Elokei hashamayim, all the kingdoms of earth, Hashem of the heavens, God of the heavens, has given to me. Ufakad alai livnot lo vayit, and he has charged me with building his house, or to him a house. Birushalayim asher bihuda, in Jerusalem, which is in Judea. For those who came in a couple of minutes late, I'm repeating the first four psukim because that's going to be tonight's focus. Gimel. Mi v'chem mikol hamo yihi Elohav imo. Any one of you, of the Jews, may Hashem be with him. V'ya'al Yerushalayim asher biYehuda. You should go up to Yerushalayim in Yehuda. V'yiven et Beit Hashem Elokei Yisrael. And he should build the house of God, King of Israel, or God of Israel. Hu ha'elokim asher biYerushalayim. That is the God who is in Yerushalayim. V'chol hanishar, all those who remain, all those who do not go to this quest, mikol ha'mekomot asher hu gar sham, wherever he may be living, yinasuhu anshe mekomo. They will have to they should help. What it means to lift up the people of their place. In what way should they help? Meaning they should help them financially in the following way: b'chesef u'b'zahav u'v'rechush u'v'hema u'vivhema, with silver and gold, all kinds of material things, animals. Besides any free will offering one may want to send up to Yerushalayim. So he's telling them like this. Here's this is the essence really of Hatzarat Koresh, and that was number one. And we're going to talk about this in a second. God has invested me, has charged me. Maybe it's, which we left off last week. Was it a Ruach HaKodesh? Was it a Nevuah? Was it a prophecy? to tell the Jews it's time to go back to Jerusalem in Yehuda. We'll see why it says both, just not sufficient to say Yerushalayim, and rebuild the house of God. He also refers to Hashem as the Lokei Hashemayim, God of the heavens. So we have to talk about some of these things now. So I want to take a look. We're going to, as I mentioned before some of you came on, mostly what we're going to do tonight is look at some Mefarshim on these first few psukim, because it's going to also help us throughout the beginning of the first couple of chapters of Sefer Ezra. So what I want to review tonight is, say again? Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Who was Esther's son?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to get to that because at this moment, it doesn't make a difference, because the whole question which we discussed about 2 weeks ago was, when did the entire story of Megillat Esther take place? Because there are two different countings. Was she before the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, after the destruction of Beit HaMikdash? So right now it doesn't make a difference, but we will get to it eventually. So what I want to deal with is, did Koresh have nevuah? Now, after class last week, Harry was quick on the draw, and it said definitely he seemed to have had nevuah. Well, we'll see tonight. What does Koresh mention, and what does he seem to leave out? In other words, there's this very, very brief declaration, and it's pretty clear, but he also leaves something out, or some things out. And finally, why would or did some people choose to not heed this call from Koresh to go to Israel and build the Beit HaMikdash? So let's take a look at some of these topics now. First one being, did Koresh have nevuah? We're going to look at the Rashi and Ralbag. We have differences of opinion. I will also tell you that most seem to agree with Rashi. Rashi says as follows, "V'hu pakad alai," which literally means he charged me. Tziva alai. Rashi says, what does it mean? Pakad tziva, lashon sivui, meaning a command. Where? It's very nice to say he commanded me, but how? Where? Would he get like an email one day and say, hey, Cyrus, time to do this? So it's interesting. What does he say? He quotes two psukim. Alidei Yeshayahu Navi. As a matter of fact, if you open Sefer Yeshayahu in Perek Mem Dalet and Perek Mem Hey, you're going to see the following. It says in there that he commanded him in Yeshayahu, livnot lo Beit HaMikdash b'Yerushalayim. In Sefer Yeshayahu, it already makes reference to Koresh and the building of the Beit HaMikdash through Koresh. Kemoshe Ne'emar b'Sefer, as it says in Sefer Yeshayahu, quote, Ha'omer leKoresh ro'i v'chol chetzi yashlim lomar Yerushalayim tivne v'heichal tusad. Again, just the basic statement that to say that Koresh will be the one, this is free translation, not word for word, who will say that Yerushalayim will be built and that the heichal, just say the heichal, because it's the Beit HaMikdash right now for in a loose term, will be put a foundation to it. Another pasuk says, Ko amar Hashem lemishicho lekoresh asher chazakti biyamenu, or biyamino. Again, another reference in Sefer Yeshayahu to Koresh, that Koresh, would be the one to build the Beit HaMikdash or see to it. Kvar ne'emra nevuah zo alidei Yeshayahu. Rashi says this is a nevuah, but it's not the nevuah of Koresh. It's the nevuah of Yeshayahu, and Koresh is aware of it. How is he aware of it? Well, if you look back at the pasuk, in the first pasuk, in the words that I actually skipped, it says, the Rashi gets it from the words, He'ir Hashem ruach Koresh melech paras. He aroused, he awoke this ruach, this spirit. Now, Harry and others, and it will be in a minute, we'll see the Ralbag, use this word ruach as more for maybe a ruach hakodesh kind of an aspect. Look what it says here. Hashem yitbarach b'chalom lekoresh ze ha'inyan. The Ralbag says it appears that Hashem showed him this issue in a dream. Ubotzivahu livnot lo bait b'Yerushalayim, and in this dream, he commanded him to build the house in Yerushalayim asher b'Yehuda. V'idmeh shera'a bechalamo shamar lo Hashem yitbarach ki hu natan lo kol mamlachot haaretz. And it also seems that in this dream, Hashem said to Koresh, he's giving him all the kingdoms of the land. He's told him that your job is to build the Bayit in Yerushalayim. So we have a little bit difference of opinion. It doesn't mean that in any way, shape, or form that Koresh was a Navi. It also doesn't mean he had what we would call a Nevuah or a prophecy. way back when we were learning Sefer Melachim, and maybe even in Sefer Shmuel, when we talked about Nivuah, we discussed the different levels of awareness and consciousness between humans and Hashem when it came to the concept of Nivuah. So we have, I hit the wrong thing. We had something called Nivuah, which is prophecy, where Hashem, besides with Moshe, who spoke panim el panim, one way or another communicated with a human, a Navi. We also talked about the idea of Ruach HaKodesh. And there's no real good translation in English, but let's just say it's a higher level of consciousness with which to communicate, that Hashem communicates with a person. It's not on the level of prophecy, and to prove that to you, matter of fact, I just had this discussion last night with somebody. I gave a shir one time on the topic of naming children and how it says that parents get a form of Ruach HaKodesh at the moment they're about to name their child and decide on a name. So Ruach HaKodesh is not Nivuah, but it's some higher consciousness level. And according to the Ralbag, this is what Koresh experienced through his dream. And he was not only told to build the Beit in Yerushalayim, but also we're told that he's referred to as Hashem, the Elohim of the heavens. You'll take a look again here. It says, Why does it? What does this mean? That he commanded him that he was going to be in charge of the Mamlechot Haaretz. So if you look again, we're following the Ralbag's opinion right now. If you take a look again at this second pasuk bet, it says Kol Koresh Melech Paras Kol Mamlechot Haaretz Natan Li Hashem Elokei Hashamayim. We see two things there. Koresh refers to the fact that Hashem has given him the kingdom of earth in order to do what he wants to do. And God is the God of heavens. Interestingly enough, in the commentaries, and I don't have that on the screen, it says that at that time, it was very common in Persia and others to refer to the God of the Jews as the God of the heavens. So that wasn't necessarily unusual. But in a sense, what he's really doing here is God said, okay, he's going to take care of heaven, and he put me in charge down here to take care of this, of his word, and I'm going to do that. On the other hand, Rashi just looks at it at Pshat. And what's Pshat? The simple reading of the Psukim. If you look in Sefer Yeshayahu in two different Prakim, it seems very clearly that Koresh already is being pre-informed, when there would be a Koresh, that he would be the one to build the Beit HaMikdash, or see to it that it's built.
Yeah, I have a fundamental question.
Go ahead.
This is even sort of before the prophecy. Koresh is not a monotheist.
Oh, very good. He's Zoroastrian, if I'm not mistaken, he's Zoroastrian, right?
He's Zoroastrian, right? Now there is some similarities.
Yes.
But why is he talking about gods?
So if you hang on to that question a little bit, I think it'll be answered tonight. I think, and if not, you'll remind me, and then I'll answer it next week. Okay.
All right.
Very good. It's a good point. Don't forget also, we're going to see not this week's parsha, but next week's parsha, and the following week, and the next week, we're going to see Paro himself referred to Elokei Hashamayim and Elokei Hayivrim, and there is this idea that there is this God in the heavens.
Like Joseph.
Right. Okay.
We already read the week before yesterday.
No, I'm talking about the next Paro, the one who is Asher Lo Yadat Yosef.
But when Yosef interpreted the dreams of the Pharaoh,
okay, there's no one like this kid, right? He's invested by God. That's correct. It already exists, but I was specifically referring to the next Paro. But you're right. It's in this one when he talks about it in Miketz. Definitely. Okay. Right. Correct. Okay, so let's take a look now at some different comments from some of you a little bit longer from the Dad Sofrim on this information. Okay, so this is kind of like an introductory comment he has. It has to do with the call to the Jewish people to rebuild Beit HaMikdash. Koresh eno maskir davar al binyan ha'ir atzma v'ha'aretz bichlal. This is one of the things I hinted to before when I asked, what did he seem to leave out? You have to remember, let's go back. When the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, it wasn't just the building was destroyed. The infrastructure was destroyed. The city was destroyed. It was laid, the terminology used in Navi is that the idea of like a plow has gone through the land and has plowed it up, it's a disaster. He doesn't mention anything about rebuilding the city, nor does he mention anything about the land in general. If he suggests that anyone who can should go, he knows that they're going to build, they're not just going to sit and lie on the ground, they're going to build places to live. They're also going to work the land. That was majority was laid waste. He wasn't, to him, that wasn't so important. He says, don't worry, there's plenty of land and there's plenty of places these people can settle. He was more focused and concerned in his charter, his edict, and his hatzara that that the Jews should build the Beit HaMikdash. Bevadai, shelo ha'ala b'dato ki yavo yom ve'eretz ktana zo ta'ala b'chashivuta al mamlacha ha'atzuma shelo. Now, I didn't put a map in front of you. I don't think I did it in the beginning of this class either, but we looked at one months ago. And when you take a look at the vast empire that existed and what the tiny little speck of Israel was at the time, which obviously still is in the world, he said it never occurred to him that one day that this tiny little strip of land would be so important in his vast empire. Hashem he'iret rucho. Hashem aroused his spirit. And he said what he said. It's possible that this king cheapened the possibility, it's not the right word, mizalzel, but it cheapened the possibility for the Jews to do some great things. There weren't a lot of Jews in the diaspora. From Yehuda, remember there were two sections. And those who were in the Golim, the exiles in Assyria, that were spread out through his kingdom, also were not very bolet, or didn't stand out very much. And many of the Jews, remember one of the things we talked about at the beginning in the introduction was many Jews had already assimilated. We said that the life of the Jews in exile wasn't like being in Mitzrayim and Shiabud and pain and suffering and being as slaves. They were living a life. And many of them, unfortunately, the quote intermarriage rate, let's say, in the assimilation was pretty strong. Hugam yada, Koresh also knew, Shelo kulam yishtamshu b'zchut latzeit mimamlacha mesuderet va'ashira. He knew that there would be people who would not want to leave a very established, organized, rich kingdom to this a faraway land that was in waste. For the Jews, this hatzara, this declaration was idud gadol, was a tremendous source of encouragement. In addition to this idea, the fact that they're being given permission to return to the land. When we get to the end of this slide, I'll just make a comment. This word of Melech Paras, who subjugated himself to the king, to the God of the Hebrews, of the Jews, was the first we see of this type in the world. Even though the Jews themselves were, in fact, slaves to the Persians or servants to the Persians, the honor and the respect of their Torah and their God was so great. This doesn't necessarily answer, Arnold, your complete question, but it does tell us that there was a known factor of a respect for the Jews and respect for God. Again, we're going to get back to that in different. Now, he's telling us a couple of things here. There's a little bit of foreshadowing also. Even though we've already read this chapter, we know that there will be Jews who are not going to go, but we know the Jews who will go, and there's going to be some friction, obviously. The question as to why they don't go, and all we're going to see in a little bit. But one of the things I asked last week, Why does he say, if you look again, it's in the front of on the screen right now, but again, just if you look at the pasuk, he says it more than one time. He's told them to build the house, libnot lo bayit b'Yerushalayim, asher b'Yehuda. It's kind of verbose, a little wordy. So he says like this, take a look here. Here and also later in Perek Daled, Kaf Daled, and Perek Hey, Bet, it uses the same terminology. When it mentions Jerusalem, it specifies it's Yerushalayim in Yehuda. We take it as a given that when I say Jerusalem, I say Yerushalayim, I know what that means. But evidently it would seem that because of the vast empire, and remember, there's a reason I'll see in a second why he's making it so clear, that if it was without mentioning it was the Jerusalem in Yehuda, that many people besides the Jews would have no idea what he's talking about. But who cares? Who cares? Who cares if the people outside of the Jewish people don't know? Because as you remember, when he talks about in the next pasuk, that those people are not going. Ostensibly, it's the Jews where he's telling to give other Jews things to take with them, money, silver, gold, and everything else. But it's also, we talked about briefly, quickly last week, that it's even the surrounding nations. So the thing, like, who cares? Because he wants it to be clear to the other nations that are in his kingdom of what it is exactly they're going to be doing and where. To
answer that question, who cares?
Say it again.
I have a suggestion to answer the question, who cares?
Okay.
Today, I don't know how many places there are in the United States that are also called Jerusalem or Bethlehem, or et cetera, et cetera. It's highly unlikely, but it's just a possibility. Perhaps there were places in his empire all over the place that were called after Yerushalayim as well. And he wanted to make clear to his other peoples, don't worry, I'm not sending the Jews to take over your town, which is also called Jerusalem. So he had said to say Yerushalayim b'Yehuda.
Right. So I actually thought of that possibility, and I went looking for someone who said it. I didn't find somebody. Doesn't mean that's not accurate. I just didn't find it. But I did. Right. But you and I actually thinking the same. That's pretty scary, by the way. On the same wavelength there.
Right. Very good.
Okay. So let's just look at this last piece of the slide. Efshar gam yadash b'chalakim acherim shel haaretz yashu ashurim b'yamim acherim ki ikea tanaseh b'mamlachto v'vaday gam noetz im yoetzav. Okay, so again, this is the idea that maybe he was going to take counsel with others, and there were people who knew about this, but I didn't want to actually read that last part of the slide. Now, let's look back at Pasuk Gimel again, and we see as follows. Actually, let me read it, then my comment before we look at the slide. Let me take it off of screen share for a minute. Mibachem mikol amo yehi Elohav imo, who from among you, from his people, may God be with him. V'yal Yerushalayim asher b'Yehuda. Let him go up to Yerushalayim in Judea. V'yiven et Beit Hashem Elokei Yisrael. He should build the house of God. Hu Elokim asher b'Yerushalayim. Okay. I think that's somewhat of a strange statement. Theoretically, if you were going to write the Hatzhara, if you were going to write this declaration telling the Jews, you're the king, you're King Cyrus, and you're telling the Jews to go and build. Remember, this is based on your either some Ruach HaKodesh or the Nevuah from Yeshayahu that you're aware of. So you know it's a pretty big deal. Why are you not just saying to my dear Jews, go and build? What do you mean, mi bachem mikol amo? Because we just said before, if you remember, Koresh knew the Jewish people. He understood he was only the king 1 year, right? But he already understood the psychology of the Jew. Take a look here, it says. You understand my question? My question is, what do you mean, mi bachem, who among you? Just say, all of you should go. The Thiamur ben Nevuat Yeshayahu, as it says in the prophecy of Yeshayahu, Hu yivnei yiri b'galuti yishalach, ra'ui haya sheyaseh harbe yoter yasher matan reshut la'alot min hagolah. Theoretically, Koresh should have done a heck of a lot more than just give permission for the Jews to go from the Galut back to Israel. Livnot b'shetach shetachat shiltonon, to build up the area that was under his rule. Mat'im haya ki hu atzmo yishtadel b'davar. It would have been appropriate that even he himself would have taken matters into his own hands somehow. But it wasn't decreed what he should do. He was only given this awakening of spiritual awakening. He did the minimum amount. Oh, 1 second. He did the minimum amount. You may not be aware of this, but in a few chapters from now, it says it's in Zion. He actually we're going to see, reneges, he puts a stop to it and has to be put into practice again. So on the one hand, we look at Koresh as being this hero who really is the one who enabled the Jews to go back to rebuild Beit HaMikdash, which again is kind of a slam at the Jews themselves, because for what we discussed last week. But at the same time, he still did what would seem to be the bare minimum according to this. He could have done a lot more. Remember, he left out about building up the land. He left out about, and we saw why. He left out about building up the land. He left out about building up, working the land, building up the land. He himself, in theory, as a good leader, could have said the equivalent of, not Mila Shamelai, but he could have led the charge. And also, we saw already, why is it that he says, who amongst you? Because he understood that not everyone was going to go, which we're going to discuss.
I have the opposite feeling that Koresh comes across as a pretty firm guy. He hears the word of Hashem. He lets these very high placing, Ezra, Nehemiah, Daniel, all these people who are highly placed in his government. He lets them go with the temple treasury. I mean, it's against his his own self-interest, but yet he does it. So it's pretty good.
It's very good. So thank you for saying that, because as is true, when you again, I really enjoy when someone mentions what I had in my head. When is true when it comes to Torah, when it comes to why is it that you have so many different commentaries on most psukim in Tanakh? Why is there Radak and Ibn Ezra and Rashi? For that very reason. The perspective of the Dat Sofrim was have a minimalistic view and a negative view somewhat of Koresh. He should have done more, he could have done more, even though he quotes the source. I'll tell you what the source was on that, by the way, because I didn't put it on the screen. I'll tell you, which was Ot Kaf. Hold on. He bases on, actually, his negative view is based on Rashi in Megillah, but at the same time, when you say not only was it against his in his, not necessarily in his best interest, the fact that he himself opens up all the utensils of the Beit HaMikdash and gives it back to them to take, again, you're right. So yes, we can look at it both ways. Yes.
I also want to say, I'm on that vein. Number one, building the Beit HaMikdash is for the Jewish people to do, unless you're going to tell me he's Jewish.
Very good.
He's Second of all,
yes.
Second of all, when you moved into your house, how long did it take you to get everything straightened out? Did you have a lot of spare time?
No.
You can always find something else to do around your house. And you say, I don't have time. I'm so busy building the bookshelves. I want to pick your thing. Okay?
Right.
I don't have time to build a Beit HaMikdash. So he's saying, I know, Mistaber, you're going to build your house, but I'm commanding you to take time out from building your house and not get about and build a Beit HaMikdash. I consider that the maximum.
I agree definitely with what you're saying, and I want to add to it a little bit. Even though grammatically the pasuk is correct, you're talking about, because just before everyone came on, Ari and I were speaking about the no Beit HaMikdash, no Achdut, which
no, I said no first.
We don't, right? That's saying one is the cause of the other. The lack of Achdut is the lack of Beit HaMikdash. Is if you take a look in that pasuk we're talking about, which is pasuk Gimel, even though it is grammatically correct, I think it's something important to point out. Mi bachem, who amongst you, from all his people, may Hashem, bless him. Then it says in singular, V'ya'al li'Yerushalayim and v'yiven. He should go up and he should build. And that's grammatically correct because you're talking about each individual, the who is, and then he should go. But I think there's, and I didn't find this anywhere, but I think it points out something that you and I spoke about before, and now you're intimating. It's in singular also, in order to have us understand that in order to do this, they have to be they have to be unified to do it. And I'm going to prove it because I'm sure many of you know that every time in the Torah, when the Bnei Yisrael travel after they leave Mitzrayim, it says vayachanu, 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 and they camped and they camped and they camped. And then it says in that when the Bnei Yisrael camped opposite Har Sinai, it says vayichan sham neged ahar, that the Bnei Yisrael camped in singular, it camped. And Rashi tells us ki ish echad b'lev echad. So even though it could have said vayichan many, many times, theoretically, but it says it only that one time. It was the only time, unfortunately, that we were so unified. Would have been a good time to build a Beit HaMikdash. In any case, let's go take a look back now. About the Yehi Elohav Imo. What does it mean? Let his God be with him. These words, when he refers to those who wish to go to, I'm just going to say Aliyah, those who are going to go on Aliyah, sound like they could be a blessing. He's blessing them. That they should be zochim, they should have the merit to be helped by God. Just like Koresh is being helped by him. It also could be maybe kind of like backing up way. It's another perspective. It's also possible that someone who may decide to stay behind, it's not going to bother him, meaning Koresh, that they could be like everybody else. They could stay behind. But let's talk for the few minutes we have. I want to talk about this whole issue of the people who didn't go. And I think this is a critical piece of information. We're going to read, it's a longish slide, not that long, but it is going to help us understand something about our own psyche. When I say our, I don't mean you and me, but I mean in Chutz La'aretz psyche, those who came on Aliyah, those who didn't come on Aliyah yet. L'maseh, in practicality, Ravu hanish'arim dafka mipnei shechasu al nichsehem. The majority of people did not come on Aliyah. And for a good part of those, the reason was that it was money issues. What does it mean, money issues? Look, we have a nice house. We have a nice parnasa. I don't know, what about this Israel business? Now, before I go on, we have to note that Rashi and even Ezra and others say that the percentage of Jews that didn't go, a good percentage of them, the reason they didn't go was they were poor and they didn't have the wherewithal. But to say that they were all poor doesn't make sense, because how is it the Koresh can say, okay, give them you're not going, give them gold and silver, and they wouldn't have had it. So on the one hand, you have people who just tachlis couldn't go. On the other hand, you had people who had the wherewithal, they had the means. You should have asked me this question already, right? If they're giving him gold and they're giving him silver and they're giving him livestock, that means they have money. They could go. What are they staying behind for? So they stayed behind. We're going to see when we get to Perek Zayin some other spiritual reasons why some stayed behind. Listen to that statement. I'm going to say it again in English. Or there were those who said, what? We're going to go to Israel because some goy is the one who gave us permission? A Beit HaMikdash that a goy gives us permission to build is not going to be a Beit HaMikdash where Hashem Shekhinah is going to come in. Not going to happen. So you had people say, I got a good income here. My life is good. I'll visit. Don't worry. I'll visit. Chagim. I'm there. Matter of fact, I might even have an apartment there. You'll have people who are going to say, I can't afford it. Tachlis, I just can't go. And then you're going to have people who are going to say, I can afford it. I'm not poor. I'm going to still visit, but what are you relying on the goyim for? You want to Beit HaMikdash? God's going to pop it down from the sky. It is scary as we go through Sefer Ezra, and especially when we get to Perek Zion and on, where Ezra has to deal with the whole hitbolalut or assimilation issue, how scary it is of how similar it is today. Then he says,
I'm sorry, we don't want to live in a state built by the Chilonim.
Right, that's right. I did exactly. So there's a book I have here. I forgot where. I'm looking at my bookshelf. I know I have it. I forgot where. Is a book that deals with those kinds of questions. It's in English, exactly those kinds of questions of how can we rely? How can we? The state was founded by Chilonim, or as someone to me referred to them today to me as not shomer al Torah mitzvot, which I thought was a nice way to say it. So I'm going to tell you. Actually, let me tell you a brief story. It's not my story. I've used it many times. It's a mashal. It's a parable that someone used a long time ago somewhere in Chicago when I was there, and I've told it over many times. Imagine a person's driving with his family down the road and hits a pothole. The car spins out, rolls over, and the tires are lying up on top, and the hood of the car, the top of the car is lying on the ground. They're upside down. Everyone's in the car. It's who knows what's going to happen. Everyone's alive. Along comes a guy who sees this accident. He pulls them all out. He calls for the ambulance. Everyone is saved. Boom! The car explodes just seconds after they're taken out of the car. After everyone's recovered out of the hospital, the father of this family, who's had his kids and his wife in the car, decides to make a seudat hoda'ah. He wants to make a Thanksgiving meal and thank Hashem, and he invites this man to the party. It's just so happens this man's not religious. So what? He's not a religious Jew. And he decides that every year he's going to have such a party, and every year he's going to invite the man who saved the family's life. The kids grow up, and they're a little uncomfortable having this non-religious Jew at their table. It's just it's a family event, and we're all frum, we're all religious, and we don't need him here. And then the next generation, they know about this, and they don't even invite the family of this boy, of this man who saved their life, and it's already forgotten. What's that all about? Without that non-religious Jew, that family would not have existed anymore. It would have wiped out, God forbid, right? You have to be makir tov with what Hashem sends as the shlichim. If someone who's not religious employs you, I was employed by a non-religious Jew for 15, 16, 17 years between two different locations. Both non-religious, one somewhat practicing and one absolutely not at all, but gave me parnasa. Now, does that mean, he was a non-religious Jew, I shouldn't even ever say thank you to him because he gave me parnasa? So now let's talk on the grand scale, let's talk on a national scale. Yes, it was a mixture of many, not only non-religious, but anti-religious Jews who helped to bring about the state of Israel. So the perspective today, or at some point in our history, it's less and less today, but still very, very common to hear it in the Chutz La'aretz. And the perspective in the time of Ezra was basically the same thing. Now, I don't want to make the comparison between non-Jew and non-religious. Obviously, they're two different worlds. But the perspective and the approach is very similar. If it's not our people, if it doesn't have the kippah on his head and she doesn't have her hair covered the right way, then we can't expect that Hashem's going to be very happy with it. So I've asked these people, would you prefer still, I've actually had this conversation, would you prefer still that the British were running the country and that Jews were treated like they were by the Arabs back then, and that the British would treat the Jews the same way today as they did back in before 1948? No, God forbid. Why would we want to have that? So you can't have it both ways. It has to be one or the other. So I just want to look at a couple more lines of this one slide before we stop, because I'm just going to just a little bit more here. Whoops, I didn't share it with you. I'm looking at it, but you don't have it in front of you. What does this mean? The two phrases, we're going to talk about one now, and we'll continue next week with the second one. What does it mean, Mikol HaMekomot? If you look again in Pasuk Gimel, it said, Mi bachem mikol amo yeh elakav imo v'yal Yerushalayim shebiuda v'even et Beit Hashem Elokei Yisrael hu. No, sorry, this is already Pasuk Dalet. V'chol hanishar mikol hamekomot, whoever remains from all the places asher hu gar sham, that he lives there. What does that mean? What is this phrase? Mikol hamekomot. Tosefet zo mechuvenet kanireh lomar. This addition seems to be aimed at, apparently, to say, she'af anashim b'mekomot aniyim yasu ken. Even the poor, even those live in the poor areas. Bazehu matil ol al hatoshavim b'makom shu atzmo yisayeh lehem, kmo she'asa al tachshashta le'Ezra. Mistaber ki ikar hakavana hayta kidelahalan. We're going to discuss this more in depth next week. I just mentioned before, on purpose, that some of the people didn't go because they're poor. But being poor doesn't exempt you from being there for your fellow Jew. He understood that too. We're going to understand next week more about what does that mean, and also why say Asher hu gar sham? Where else are you going to live? Like if I say to you, I say to Harry, Harry, okay, Harry, I'm talking to you now where you're sitting. Well, you're not. I'm talking to you not where you're not sitting. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And then we'll also have to talk about this idea of who was expected to help their brethren make their way to Israel with funding the trip, so to speak. In the meantime, I wish everyone a good evening, a Shavua Tov. Reminder that those of you who are in or are joining the Tanya class, it's Tuesday night at 7:00, Bezrat Hashem. And if you're interested in joining, you're not in it, please just send me a message privately and make sure to add you into the group. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, will it happen this week?
Say it
Rabbi,
again.
Are you doing it this week?
Tuesday
Are
night.
you going to be after the fast?
Yes, Bezrat Hashem, 7:00.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.